and welcome to the Minnesota Church Center. This is the headquarters of CBE. We're just upstairs by one floor. My name is Ashley Pikel. I'm CBE's ministry intern this summer, chapter leader at my school, and I will not be stating my school's name for protecting the innocents that are there, so please don't ask. And I'm a diehard egalitarian. I first visited the CBE office with my dad, like he said, during my Christmas break, the year I started a chapter at my college. I was sent home with encouragement, ideas, and a huge box full of materials. Not only new materials, not only was the chapter able to bring in speakers such as Dr. Alan Johnson, but the materials that CBE gave me to distribute inspired students to ask for more information. They had read Gordon Fee's famous article on Ephesians, and they requested more speakers. This led to Dr. Linda Belleville's visit to our campus to challenge the majority's interpretation of 1 Timothy 2. Now, that was the really nice, censored version of how a CBE chapter came to life on my campus. What follows is the true story. I first learned about the possibility of CBE's presence on my campus when one of my professors mentioned that a fellow professor was interested in starting a chapter. After debates were held last year regarding gender and ministry, this Bible professor knew how desperately the campus needed the message of biblical equality and gender justice. In this debate, held in our chapel, attended by many students, our campus pastor and the Bible professor openly debated the role, or lack thereof, of women in the church. Our pastor was, and still is, staunchly against such a heresy, even stating at one point that he believed, quote, "Men are better at women than preaching the Bible," end quote. That was a big mistake. Once I heard that this professor, whom I'd never met before, was thinking about starting a chapter, I was all in. I ran down to his office and said something like, "Hi, I'm Ashley Pikel. I've never met you before, but I hear you want to start this chapter, and I will do whatever it takes to get it started." And I had to repeat this a few times because I talk really fast in my Minnesotan voice, but he got the point. He chatted with me for a few minutes, and then gave me his wife's phone number, who was also in line with our goal of starting the chapter. We were off. You see, I also had my own reasons for wanting an egalitarian perspective on campus. I learned a lot about biblical equality, not through any practice of it though. I had had enough run-ins of my own with ignorant professors and classmates. It was time to very politely fight back. Take for instance my very first conversation at school with a young freshman boy. We were on each other's brother-sister floor, where you're supposed to get to know each other through cookouts and movie nights, and once we even played sardines in our library. While we only got together once, I will remember this boy. Always. The general greeting when meeting a new person at college was, "What's your name? Where are you from, and what's your major?" After that followed, "What do you want to do with your major?" We were really creative. After answering the first 3 questions, I excitedly told him, "I cannot wait to be a pastor. I'm so passionate about preaching. I just can't wait to go into seminary," and on and on and on. And then it came. My first example of a complementarian perspective from a fresh-faced boy, more excited about meeting girls than talking about God's work in our world. He kind of crinkled up his face and replied, "You want to be a pastor even though the Bible says that you can't?" Poor boy. At the time, I was stunned. I had heard stories of women not allowed to preach, but I chalked it up to sexism. Not anymore. After asking him where that prohibition was in the Bible and him mumbling something about Timothy, I knew I had to figure this thing out. Another disturbing experience came in my Bible class on the Old Testament. Now, do any of you remember those classes that happened right after lunch, and you're a bit tired, you might be right now, and you're ready for a nap? The days when you're not totally listening to what the professor's saying? That's what I thought had happened when I heard my teacher say that the serpent specifically chose Eve to tempt because she was a woman. Then I asked him to repeat what he had said. Unfortunately, I was wide awake. He replied, "The serpent chose Eve because she's more emotional as a woman, and therefore more vulnerable." Now, I don't consider myself a violent person, you can ask him, but I probably would have hit him had he not been my teacher and the fact that I would be kicked out of school. Luckily, I took the more peaceful route and asked the professor afterwards if I could find more resources on the topic. He sent me to a professor that recommended books only by complementarian authors. I didn't know what to do. In college, it's generally okay to have doubts like, is God really good? What's his ultimate plan in this world? How can he let some people, suffer while others are living these great lives? But my doubt wasn't acceptable, mainly because it was more of a strong statement. I decided I didn't want to follow God if he didn't make me equal to man and didn't want me using my gifts because of my gender. I can think of several other stories, including the time when I was asked out on a date and then told that the idea that I was a feminist was a turnoff. You can bet that did not last long. After these experiences and many more, I feel I'm able to adequately answer the following questions. The top 10 questions you ever had about student chapters. And the best part is, if I don't explain something fully, if you're a little tired after lunch, you can ask me to repeat it in the end. Here we go. Number 1, what went well? Faculty support. I was so surprised at how many professors came out of the woodwork expressing the same views, expressing the same desire to see this perspective on campus. It was kind of this hidden thing that was talked about in like professors' Bible studies, but you can't endorse that in class unless it's a specific class. I had professors I was able to email and say, can you give me names of students that might be interested in discussing this? And I got a list of about 200 kids that way, and that's part of how we started the chapter. Student interest in the topic. Right now, if anything has to do with social justice, it's in, and we've done poverty, we've done racial injustice, sex trafficking. Those topics had already been done. This was the new topic. This hadn't been talked about before, mainly because it was so divisive. So luckily, we had that on our side. The challenges, there were many. The first was male students, sorry, men. Male students on my campus have not been receptive. I've lost a lot of friends because they feel that this is the only thing that I'm about, and while it's definitely one of the highest priorities in my life, it's not the only thing. But when you profess this is all you're about, and they close off conversations with you. They don't want to come to the events, they don't want to discuss it. The next challenge was female students. There were a lot of conversations where I'd be talking with them and they'd say, you know, I'm okay with having a male pastor, and I don't think I'd really be comfortable with a female pastor. Do you have female professors? Do you listen to female students? Do you have tutors, right? Like women pray in chapel. I don't understand. That was really hard, especially when you kind of feel like you're going to have your gender on your side. Again, faculty, my Old Testament history teacher, grades were an issue. I've been graded down on a few papers. I did my Greek paper on Ephesians 5. So my interpretation was not the same as the teachers. I also don't want to burn bridges with them, but I'm also not willing to sacrifice to give up what I believe to make them happy. So that's been a really difficult balance. The last challenge has been interest. If we do a speaker who's talking on marriage, Dr. Al Johnson came in and did this. There's a ton of people. There's couples, there's boyfriends and girlfriends, there's singles who want to get married. They're all there. Theology, not so much. And this is really sad because this is really where you convert or convince people, because you can see women in ministry, you can see egalitarian relationships, and you're like, okay, I see how that can work, but these verses, and you can't explain it. And if we could just work on getting more of the students to these, that would be great. That's a challenge that we're really hoping to overcome this year. What did I learn specifically? This surprised me when I wrote this up. I was thinking it would be a lot about biblical theology. It was more life lessons like respect, that my passion equals someone else's passion in some area of their life. As passionate as I am about biblical equality, someone out there is as passionate about going to Africa and being a missionary there, and I need to respect what they're saying, because when students have told me how dumb this is or how unapplicable this is, it just crushes you, and I would never want to do that to someone else. And I always need to remember that when I'm listening. It's harder to do when you're talking to someone who's complementarian, but I'm working on it. Also, I've learned to relinquish, to let go. People will think you're crazy. I've been called more names in college than I think in middle school. So people will think you're a little off, but the good ones won't. I have a few very close friends who believe the same way that I do, who understand why I get mad, why I cry, why I want to change this. And then I have a larger circle of friends who will listen, who don't necessarily agree, but will share and will support me in this. Finally, to rest, which I'm not doing very good at. We talked about at our Toronto conference this year. I helped co-lead a chapters workshop with Sharon and Karen, who co-lead the Toronto chapter. And there are high energy chapters and low energy chapters. And high energy is like bring in speakers, have an event once a month, and then low energy is like do a book study and have discussions over coffee. And you can't pull that off in college. You need to have big events, you need big names. So we're trying to find a balance between doing all of these all these tasks that take so much time and not burning out, which is why it's so important to have a steering committee. What reactions did I receive from the campus? Lots of interest, but not so much commitment. Where I go to school, there are so many programs already set up. People have their Monday ministry, their Tuesday ministry, they do this on Saturdays, they do this for chapel. So it makes sense that they wouldn't commit to something brand new right away. But it was also a fear of, is this a heretical thing? Is this really biblical? Is this those crazy feminists invading our campus? But it was good because at least people were willing and open to the idea. Also, lots of ignorance. Why does this matter? And like, we have women in chapel. Women are in a Christian ed major. I'm a Christian education major. They get to do what they want. But then you walk to chapel and someone says, oh, but there's a woman preaching. I'm not going to go. That's why it matters. Yeah. And some excitement, mainly from professors again. They were able to support the chapter without getting into too much trouble. There'd never been any risking of their jobs or anything, but it's always more effective when students are starting something and when they can advertise it in their classes, where they can get extra credit for going, which we're really working on, because that'd be fabulous. And they were thrilled that they could get their points of view out there without it just being like the stamped on, you have to agree with it because it's a professor's point of view. How did we promote events with a great steering committee? We had great connections. Like I said, I'm a Christian ed major. The Christian Educational Ministries Department was great. Our secretary taught me how to book rooms, what nights were the least busy. We found that Tuesdays work really well, nothing's going on then. And the best way to promote events and to sell them is to have dinner with the speaker beforehand. We have our dining commons, we call it the DC. You can take your tray with your food and the faculty will come as well, and you can ask the speaker questions. You can get to know more of their life story, ask more like what they won't share in the presentation because it's too controversial. And our faculty love this idea because these are well-respected colleagues like Dr. Alan Johnson and Dr. Linda Belleville. They want to meet them, so if we have a dinner beforehand, they're going to come. Also, mass email is a great way to promote it. Most college students generally get about 10 of these a day, but if you have big font, bright colors, and a catchy title, you might just get them. And then finally, our school's weekly newsletter. These are put on all of the tables in our cafeteria, and there's this unspoken rule that if it's there, you read it, so we took advantage of that. How did we plan events? Like I said, we have a great steering committee. The first year we started it, we had about 8 people. Sadly, about 4 of them were seniors, so we lost quite a few. This year we have 2 boys and 2 girls. We have a lot of conflicting schedules though. 2 of the guys are PAs, they're called RAs, residence assistants at any other college. And the other gal is busy as well. So we've learned that if you mention food, you can get people together and they'll plan. So I've been able to get people out of bed at like 7 in the morning on Saturday if there's breakfast. So planning events, making it enticing works really well. Faculty support. Having teachers that said, this is what I was talking about in my class, you can talk about this with your speaker and relate it to the class, and you can get those students' interest by that. And then professors' connections. The Bible prof that helped me start this, he is friends with Dr. Alan Johnson, and that's a direct result of why he came. What are the unique needs of college students in regard to the gender debate? We really need to clarify the marriage versus ministry. There's a lot of wants for equality in ministry, but not in marriage. And I think part of it, a lot of it obviously is just a well-known fact that you go to college, you want to end up married by the end of it. And it's okay to want to use your gifts in ministry. It's okay for the women to be in those classes. But once you say, I want that equality in a marriage, I want to be able to help lead in the marriage, it kind of takes you off the market, and that's a big fear where I go to school. So we're trying to show how these are not mutually exclusive ideas. Second, that this is a lifelong thing. Right now it only seems to matter in college students' eyes because they're thinking about getting married. So I should probably figure out if I think like an egalitarian or a complementarian, and if I believe in mutual submission. And well, I'm starting to go into ministry, so am I okay if there's a female head pastor there, if there's women on staff? But it's not just then, it's forever. Like, all of you in this room can attest to the fact that it's still going on today. So that's another unique need. And finally, male leaders, because once one man steps up, it shows that you don't lose your masculinity. And that's been the biggest fear, like men not wanting to. It seems like a girl group, girl power, let's all go for biblical equality, but we need men and women, so we are desperately praying for more men. We do have 2 great guys, so we want to find even more. How long did it take to start the chapter, and how long to plan the events? This is in college speak. It took 1 semester, which is about 4.5 months, and a lot of emails. When we first started this, I spent about 2 months just emailing, getting names from professors, sending out a general email saying, this is CBE, this is what we want to do. If you're interested, let us know. If you want to start planning it, let us know. And after 2 months, I had 2 different lists of those wanting to plan and those wanting to just attend. We had our first formal event 4 months after we became a chapter. The school year does make it difficult to plan. You have Thanksgiving breaks and you think, oh, it's a break, you'll work on this. No, you have homework. Christmas break, you can work on it. No, you have no homework. You're not going to do any work over that break. We also have something called J-term, where you take a 4-hour class in 1 month, and students often travel, so that's not a good planning time. So that is hard. So we've made a goal of 2 events each semester. It gives us 2 months of planning and advertising prep for each, and we'd love to do more. We'd love to start having more of a monthly low-key, watch a movie, discuss it, listen to a recording from the conference, discuss it, and we'll see how that goes this year. That's our plan. Why is a chapter like this needed? Why am I standing up here? Why do I do this at my school? I don't know. No. College students are the next generation of egalitarians. We went to the conference this year. There's a lot of comments. What's going to happen in the future? Where were all the young people? There's just pools of students out there that are looking for answers, that are smart, that are intelligent, and they're who we need to hit. And the way you do that is through chapters, through getting them where they live. Like, CBE headquarters seems like this big place in the sky, and there's a bunch of computers, and there's people that work there, and it's this huge thing, and you realize it's this tiny little suite. But what we need is to really get these kids going, because they're not going to learn it once they get out of college. We all have our stories of how we came to the idea of biblical equality. You know, that one time when the pastor came in and said, you know what, you're not married, so you can't help teach. You're a woman, you can't teach in general. And we want these stories to happen earlier on in life. We want people to be like, oh, I was 6 years old and my dad told me I couldn't do this, and I told him, Dad, that's not biblical. Like, we want those stories earlier, and you do that by informing the students earlier. We want this to be a nationwide college trend. Like, it's perfect. The kids are trapped on the campus. Where are they going to go? They have, like, buildings that you can meet in. It's beautiful. You don't have jobs yet. You have homework, which is important. But, like, it's just the perfect breeding ground for these chapters. And young people need these role models, and they aren't getting it from most churches. And you can get this from this chapter, and you can get it from CBE in general, but we really want to get those student chapters going. Finally, what keeps me going and what keeps me from being discouraged, this is something I think I really just realized this summer, is understanding that discouragement will always be a part of this adventure. If you go into this thinking it's exciting and it's always rewarding and it's never hard, you're gonna burn out right away. Like, once you realize that it's a part of the journey instead of a derail from the journey, it's a whole lot easier to keep going. Obviously CBE, when I was in that freshman class and the prof told me, you use the woman, emotional, and I went to those books and found out the complementarian and CBMW, and then I learned there's another group called CBE, and I really like them better. And then researching it and finding out that they are biblical and it wasn't just something that I wanted to believe in. That was what kept me and keeps me sane, is knowing there's this place in Minnesota that believes what I do, and I'm not crazy for being the only one on my campus. Not the only one of the few on my campus. And then honestly, my parents. You saw my dad. My mom's at work, so she couldn't be here. He drove an hour and a half to get here. He's going to drive an hour and a half home. And they are the 2 people that I can call when I need to cry, and when I have success stories, and when I have questions. And they never doubt me, no matter what. even if I'm screaming at God for why did you have to make it so hard to get this message across. So it really is my parents, and I wouldn't be standing here without them. And I wasn't planning on crying this hard. It's definitely my parents though, and all of the CBE community. Going to the conference was fabulous, meeting 150 people from around the world who support you. Like, that's what you need, is that affirmation, and that's what keeps me going. Whew. And having a father who will laugh anyway. So those are the questions that I answered. What are your questions?
When people ask more than one, it says, what's your question?
Oh, okay, that's when he sometimes gets annoying. Yes. Yeah.
I guess my question is, okay, I'm not a student, or at one time I was a student,
Right.
but I was still an older student. I didn't. How can we fit into this to help promote it? I mean, the University of Minnesota, for one, needs this hugely.
Yeah.
And, as an outsider, I don't know how to approach Christian groups that are on the campus, or to even get something like that started.
Well, I know just recently we got an email from someone in Indiana who wants to be a part of a CBE chapter, and we're the only one in the state that I just mentioned that you all need to forget. And she's going to come join us, and I think it really has to be initiated by adults and then inviting students in. It's very difficult without bringing in students and mentoring them. It's very hard to get into the colleges right now. They have so many programs set up. It's a very, very good question. I really think, for one, supporting, this is going to sound fake, but it's not, supporting CBE, because this internship is allowing me to do so much more at my school. Showing interest in formating chapter leaders, like being willing to go to schools, to approach them and say, here's an idea for a new chapter, what students might be interested in this. And then just advertising it maybe as an outside event and inviting students in. Good question, Liz.
What kind of numbers have you gotten for some of your bigger ones? Like you said, the marriage one, you had a lot more.
There were 1,900 students, and we had 200, which is a huge percentage on one night, crammed into our recital hall. We had people sitting on the floor, we had people standing in the back, outside the doors, 200 for that. And then when Dr. Linda Belleville came, I'd say we had about 120. We still had a pretty good turnout, and that was straight up scripture, 1 Timothy 2. So considering all the other activities, like I said, there's at least one speaker every night. Those have been the numbers, and that's good for the amount of people on our campus.
How do you do this advocacy and activism without being labeled a troublemaker, not just on campuses, but how could it be applied to people working in churches or in their Bible studies?
Honestly, I don't know if that's possible, because people are going to judge you how they want to. I think once you approach something, I've been learning and trying to use the phrase gentle and humble spirits more and more this summer. But if you do that and you're still getting labeled a troublemaker,
Swim by it.
you have to. There's no other way. There's always going to be name callers. But I think if you go in and you know that you're doing something that's pure, that's blameless, then if it's always helpful to not come on attacking. Like sophomore year, I thought that my role was to raise my hand and shout really loud every time we talked about women and share all my ideas because I'd researched them and I was so excited. But I think approaching it in a more calm way and not acting like it's a do or die situation, like I need to convert this person in this conversation or it failed. I think seeing it more as a journey or a process makes your approach more gentle, and then you're not so much labeled as a troublemaker.
Things in the broader society affect your campus when you're discussing this sort of stuff? I mean, this was a unique year to be doing it because there was a presidential candidate who was a woman for the first
Yeah.
time, who even talked about her faith. Did that have an overlay at all?
Well, we had a lot of I hate Hillary Clinton t-shirts at our school. I think as far as how it impacted our campus, I think it gave more light to CBE because they're like, all right, women are smart, women can run a country. But they kind of used that as a way to mock women in leadership. Any news about someone rising to a higher stature that's a woman is kind of turned around and mocked at the campus, and so that's something we'll try to take and use in our marketing. But yeah, you'd think it'd be a little more helpful, but unfortunately it wasn't. So it does impact us, but not necessarily in a positive way. Does that answer your question?
I was worried that was the answer to the question, yeah.
There was one girl in my apocalyptic lit class who wore like we have those Jesus is my homeboy t-shirts. It was like a Hillary's my homegirl t-shirt or something, and she's about the only person on campus. So, yeah. Sadly.
Do you think it would be easier to start a chapter, CBE chapter on a non-Christian campus just because of the fact that people tend to be a little more open-minded? They're not as conservative, and I'm conservative in a lot of ways, so I'm not saying anything negative, but they would be a little more open-minded and they have a little more freedom that way. I guess the key thing would be to, like your question, a foot in the door would be finding out that Christian organizations are already in place possibly and working through them.
That's a better answer. Good job,
Well, just a thought,
Well, I would say I found, at least at the U, that there's quite a bit of hostility toward anything Christian, and I actually found that, like, the Jewish studies, people were more open to Christians than, say, the secular departments, the sciences. So I don't know, that's a good question, because that's what I wondered. I just thought, how far would you get?
It wouldn't surprise me. I'm sorry, you're still going. I guess it wouldn't surprise me if the hostility came from like the administration or the professors, but if you could get down to the student level, I don't know this for a fact, but there have to be an awful lot of believers on the U of M campus. I mean, based on thousands of students,
There's got to be a percentage.
So yeah, if you can find out about that, Mimi.
Well, it's the University of Minnesota has a Christian organization, and they have brought in CBE speakers, and they usually do about once a year. But really, to be honest with you, you have to really ask them to do that because it slips out of their consciousness.
Oh.
So and I know the people you can contact, but there are university chapters, Campus Crusade, who actually, that group is more and more open to egalitarians. And it's just even a dialogue between two perspectives is often helpful.
Debates. And that's a good question, and I don't go to a secular campus, so it is hard for me to imagine, but I've always said if a chapter can be started where I go to school, it can be started anywhere. And, no, really.
Yeah, really.
I do feel like it'd be easier to open on a secular campus. I think even if you took the label of Christians for Biblical Equality off and did the same tactics, like there's been certain things we've wanted to do for, not protest, that's such a wrong word, but make more statements and put up signs with phrases, and we've just been like, we can't do that because we would get protested against so quickly. And if we're on a secular campus, I mean, the idea of what we'd be doing would be right either way, but it just wouldn't be accepted where I go. I think it would be more accepted on a secular campus.
You mentioned the word debate,
Yes.
and I was wondering if you had any debates on your campus, and if you had planning, if you discussed it in your planning, and what are your thoughts about whether debate is actually an effective tool or not?
Well, considering CBE was birthed off of that debate, I think they're very effective. A lot of people saw what the campus pastor thought, and while they didn't totally disagree, there were a lot of questions like, he really thinks that men are just inherently better, that doesn't sit right, even if they weren't willing to explore the idea fully yet. We had a panel discussion with professors, they were all egalitarian, and that was very effective. And I think debates are good because it allows the things that normally bring people apart, like it's a place where it's good for us to have conflict. And it's where the bad stuff is really hashed out and brought up, and it's a safe place to do that. I think debates are awesome. I think we should do more. So we plan on acting on that this year or next year.
When you think of all the resources you've come into contact this summer, is there a certain specific topic that you just really feel like, wow, students just don't get this? Is there like certain verses or certain approaches to?
Well, I would have to say resources on Genesis and 1 Timothy 2. I'm actually writing a curriculum on Biblical Equality 101, and there's a lot of reading into Genesis that happens about being first, you're better. It's so grade school. And then it's used and people buy into it. And I shouldn't just say buy into it, some people really do resources and believe it, but it just makes me so upset because they're oppressing so many people because of it. I think that students need to read more about what the Bible really says. I think they need to read more deeply into context. Was 1 Timothy 2. I think that's the #1 resource that they need to look at. It's hard though because Dr. Linda Belleville is very smart and hard to get into some of what she writes, but it's genius. Those would be the 2 things I think students need to read and learn about, is what those 2 books really say.
When you're talking about how you have 4 students involved, is that just in chapter leadership or is that your chapter right now?
Our chapter, good question. We are set up differently than pretty much any other chapter. We're the only student chapter currently. We have a steering committee that's the 4 of us, and hopefully we'll get more. And instead of having like a chapter that's 30 members and there's a steering committee of like 5 people, we do a steering committee of 4 people, and then we hold open events. So we're really the only members of CBE, and I think that's what we're going to keep doing until there's enough interest shown that people want to become members. I think right now if we did events and said, and here's the membership if you want to join and pay money, and that never goes well for college students. So it is really us 4 and then open events for our students.
Well, and then when you were talking about faculty support, obviously some support, some don't, but percentage-wise, is it like 50% of the faculty supports you, or not that much? Or?
In the Bible department, we just had someone retire, which is really sad. He was a great supporter. In the Bible department, I'd say maybe 30% support us. Campus, I was talking to a prof about this freshman year, probably 2% of the campus though, total, really support this idea, this belief.
2% of professors or the
Whole campus, whole, everyone, faculty, staff, students. Very tiny. We're working on it.
And I'm also curious then too to know within that percentage, at least of faculty, what the ratio of women to men would be.
Yeah, we got our first female Bible professor 2 years ago. We have, and so it's essentially all male, and like I said, I think 30% of the male would support. We have a couple that are starting to teeter back and forth, and really there's a professor of mine that really encourages me whenever I do and gives me opportunities, and you just wrote this paper, I know I'm going to publish what you wrote, and wants me to do all this, and comes back to the scripture again. And I can't reconcile myself with the scripture. So I should say 30% support, 15 are kind of back and forth, and then whatever the rest of the percentage are, no way. Forget it. Unfortunately, our head of the whole thing is forget it.
Do you only have one female professor in the Bible department?
Yes. The thing is though, is that we want more, but it's not exactly the most inviting atmosphere to come into. So we're working on it. We did interview working in the Christian Ed offices, helped me see these little behind the scenes things. We interviewed a male and a female. Hopefully the female gets a position, I don't know. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more female faculty elsewhere though.
Ashley just wrote a wonderful article for our online journal called Equality. And I don't know if you'd be willing, Ashley, to comment on sort of your last paragraph there that you thought really made some changes.
Right. I was asked to write on evidence for equality instead of constantly disproving or trying to disarm patriarchy, hierarchy, complementarianism, whatever you will, and say what evidence I've been seeing in my college of the idea of equality. And what I've learned is best is one-on-one conversations with people and making it more about a journey than this one big event where everyone's supposed to be changed. I have several female friends who are in charge of so many men who are, residence assistants, like the in-charge resident assistant of their dorms, and those guys have to go to her and learn from her and obey her. And the fact that dorm directors, faculty are okay with placing females in positions that high are really good. I think when you see a female student doing something great, telling that to the faculty is very helpful. I think allowing yourself to be kind of cast out as that weird person, like stating your views in class, even if you think people are then going to mock you, like it lets people think, oh, I guess I can maybe think about that too. She said it out loud. The main thing though, I wrapped up the article with the most important thing that sometimes doesn't seem like it helps, but that is because we are human and I am human and can't see it, but it's prayer. There's been a lot of changes. We're praying, made it our goal to pray for our campus pastor. There have been a lot of changes. The fact that we got Dr. Alan Johnson and Dr. Bell to our college, I don't know how. Like, that's just unreal. Amazing. The fact that CBD exists is like a prayer. So praying for these campuses and then seeking out young women who have gifts and encouraging them to use them, which sounds very duh, but that doesn't happen. So finding them and encouraging them and saying it's okay. Go for it.
I'm just curious as to why you chose the college you're at.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I was debating between two. Ended up going to this one, and it was actually in college because I'd gone to a Lutheran church for the last 2 years of high school. So when I said I want to be pastor, that's awesome, supported. Then I went to school, and literally that conversation, it was the first conversation ever when he told me that women weren't supposed to be pastors because it said something like that in the Bible. That was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I had no idea it was an issue. Like I said, I thought it was sexism. I thought it was just men being stupid. Sorry. Like I did, like that was my ignorance in the matter. But I really am glad I went there because there's really no other campus that could have needed this more and that could be moved further along as a result. However, I will be looking very carefully at grad schools. I kind of want to go to a place where I'll be a little more supported. So that's in a year or two.
I have felt that just generationally, the upcoming leadership in the church, in various factions, just that generationally, your generation, I think you're on the way deep end of something with people that you're coexisting with that is getting better. I mean, I truly feel I see a lot of movement with the younger people, alleviating some of this, much more openness.
There is. That is a very true statement, but unfortunately when you look at Christian liberal arts colleges, it's kind of backwards. Like, it's been said over and over again, but it's still true. Captivating and Wild at Heart is #1 Bible study book. Oh, kills me. so unbiblical. There's nothing biblical about it. It talks about movies the whole time. And when you're just in college, you just want to get married and you want to make sure that you're that submissive little wife and that you're that leader husband. And I think outside of a lot of Christian colleges that is true. Inside, it's harder, which I wish it wasn't.
Have you noticed that several denominations are starting, I don't know if they're running scared, but they're starting to clamp down on female leadership roles and removing it out of, all I can think of is out of fear of losing their power.
Oh, yeah.
And so then that would kind of translate into your Sunday school classrooms, teenage and youth groups. Have you seen that it's like spreading through other denominations, not just one, but?
Unfortunately, I go to an interdenominational school, so, but what was the church that you just prayed about? That Joanne Lyon?
Oh, the Wesleyan denomination.
Right. Being here, we pray a lot about churches. I've actually feel like I've seen a lot more acceptance of women and a lot more acceptance of the possibility, like we agree to think about this and not just shove it aside. But there is a lot of clamping down. Kevin Giles, he's a genius. If you are interested at all in learning more about that, he did a lecture at our conference called "The Pope Has Ruled Females Aren't Subordinated Forever," something very similar to that. And he talks about that, how men are really afraid of like a power flip, and that's what this movement is about. It's about making women on top and men on the bottom. It's not equal. And I think that's where it's coming from. And I don't know, I can't, someone else a little more qualified to comment on the denominations part.
Well, I think it's a backlash is what Ashley's saying, and rooted in fear. So in the last 2 years, we've seen 4 major groups embrace biblical equality for men and women in churches and parachurch groups. And the Wesleyan Church, as Ashley just mentioned, has appointed their first female president. And that's the first woman president of a denomination since Phoebe Palmer founded the Foursquare Church. So in American church history, that's really significant. Let's just hope that the news entities cover it.
Yeah.
We know Joanna rather well. And I think, like my friend right here mentioned the book that was written, I can't remember the title either, about the feminization of the church, a recent book that was published. But women are people. They're human beings created in God's image, and the fact that humanity is gendered male and female is just a beautiful reflection of the diversity and community in the Godhead. And we should be no more afraid of gender in humanity than ethnicity or any other element that makes humanity rich and beautiful. But and we have to really address the fear, and I think fear is addressed, and Ashley really brings this out in the article she's publishing, and it's really helpful. But as maybe you can talk about asking questions and education being what you've done so well.
Right. What I've done and gotten called several names for again, so I don't always recommend this. We were in class one day, and it was some class in church history, and talking about requirements for a deacon, and knowing that in the Bible it says you have to, I'm going to slaughter the verse, that you have to be married, you have to have a wife. I'm like, well, why didn't you state, you devil's advocate, that they have to be male? And he goes, like no answer. And then the next day we actually spent a whole day on women in ministry and talking about scripture and what it says and what it doesn't say and how we practice that at our school and do we really practice that at our school. And I think asking those questions, in one class I asked the professor if I thought that if God was a male. That was part out of anger at the professor, but I asked it really politely. And he's like, no, God's above gender, he's not a male. And then a girl raised her hand and said, well, I think God must be male because, Jesus was a guy, and how else could Mary have conceived? Like, that was seriously what she thought. So I think asking these questions hopefully makes them think. Those are like the little questions I've tried to ask, like seemingly obvious, but we just don't, everything's so masculinized, we don't think about it.
Do you have literature on that issue about deacons in the church?
And I think really Ashley's pointed out already, one of the best resources is Linda Belleville's book, Women Leaders in the Church. Sadly, it's just gone out of print, but
Do we have it in our library?
we have it in our library. We have a lending library upstairs.
I think it might be propping up the projector actually. So we have it.
You might, I think you might be able to get it on Amazon, actually. But I think what Ashley's pointing to is just, the element of rationality or critical thought in all of this. That we assume and make assumptions about how church should work based on just what we know. But when you push the question logically, people realize what thin ground they're standing on. And she's really done a marvelous job at her school against all odds. And I think she deserves our respect and acknowledgement. Yes.